Have you ever walked into a totally silent room and just felt this heavy, suffocating weight? Like an unacknowledged argument or something?
Oh, absolutely, where the air itself is literally thicker.
Right. And your own stomach ties into a knot before anyone even looks at you. Or maybe you've remembered a completely mundane moment from, I don't know, 30 years ago with such intense sensory detail.
Like you could actually feel the cold temperature of the room.
Exactly. You feel the cold air, you sense the unspoken sadness of the people who were there. Well, if you know exactly what I'm talking about, you are in the right place today.
Because we are definitely not talking about magic today.
No, not at all. We are not talking about psychic powers or crystal balls. We are looking at a hardwired biological survival mechanism.
It's a really profound shift in how we understand human perception, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
We are exploring a deeply innate neurological architecture.
Which is crazy because it lies completely dormant in most of the population.
Right. But it gets violently awakened in some people due to very specific environmental pressures.
So we're talking to you. Yes, directly to you listening right now, especially if you've spent your entire life being told that you are, too sensitive.
Or that you're constantly imagining things, that's a big one.
Yeah, that happens so much. Or perhaps you are a leader, a manager, or a coach desperately trying to decode the unspoken, draining dynamics of your team.
Or maybe you're just someone caught in an exhausting relationship loop, one that you just cannot seem to name, let alone escape.
Totally. So today's deep dive is answering one incredibly profound question. What exactly is clairsentience?
And to answer that, we have to completely strip away the mystical vocabulary, just throw it out.
So no tarot cards today.
No tarot cards.
Yeah.
We're going to examine this phenomenon through the grounded empirical lenses of neuroscience, developmental psychology, and relational dynamics.
Which means we're unpacking the exact biology of intuition, plus the mechanics of nonverbal attunement, and this really fascinating cognitive ability called mental time travel.
It is so fascinating.
Yeah.
But we need to define our terms first.
Yeah, I want to jump right into the deep end here because for decades, pop culture has severely muddied the waters around what it means to be intuitive.
Especially with that massive catch-all buzzword.
Empath. Right. Everyone uses it. But clairsentience is something far more specific and honestly far more mechanical.
It requires a strict definition. So, etymologically, the term clairsentience comes from the French words clair, meaning clear, and sentir, meaning to feel.
So it literally translates to clear feeling.
Exactly, clear feeling. Now, historically, in Western esotericism, it was categorized as one of the four main clairs.
Right. There's clairvoyance, which is clear seeing.
And clairaudience, clear hearing.
Yeah.
Plus claircognizance, clear knowing. But clairsentience is unique because it is entirely somatic.
Meaning it's body-based.
Yes, it's not a vision in your mind's eye. It is a literal physiological sensation in your gut, your chest, or your nervous system.
And there is a brilliant, entirely necessary distinction to be made here between an empath and a clairsentient.
The water analogy, right?
Yeah, the water analogy. Okay, so if we imagine human emotion as water, let's say there is a deep, pervasive sadness pooling in a room. The empath is essentially walking into that room as a dry sponge.
Precisely. The empath absorbs that water. They take on the ambient sadness until they are completely saturated.
They just get heavy and dripping with it.
Right. And the real tragedy of that purely empathic response is that eventually the sponge cannot distinguish its own natural state from the water it just absorbed.
Wow, so the empath doesn't just feel the sadness, they literally become the sadness.
They do.
Yeah.
And they carry it home with them. That leads to profound burnout, chronic fatigue, and just an almost total loss of personal boundaries.
Which sounds like an utterly exhausting way to live. I mean, constantly absorbing everyone else's stuff.
It is. But the clairsentient operates on a completely different framework.
Right. Okay, let's unpack this. If the empath is a sponge, the clairsentient is a moisture detector.
That is the perfect mechanical analogy for this. The clairsentient walks into that exact same room, and their internal alarm registers the exact presence, amount, and quality of the water.
So their perceptive architecture gives them a highly accurate, high-resolution reading.
Exactly. Like there is extreme volatile sadness in this room, and it is radiating specifically from that person sitting in the corner.
But, and I think this is the critical distinction, they do not become soaked by it.
No, they don't. They register the data without taking the emotion into their own nervous system as a permanent resident.
You get the data without the water damage. I love that.
It really changes everything. That reframe alone shifts the entire paradigm of how sensitive people can operate in the world.
And it's so fascinating because when you look back through history, this isn't some new age internet trend, Cultures have been trying to describe this moisture detector for millennia.
Oh, absolutely. It's ancient.
You have Egyptian oracles sensing the energetic shifts of the land, or Native American shamans acting as the emotional barometers for their entire communities.
Detecting sickness or tension
Yeah.
before it even manifested physically, right? You even see it in Eastern traditions.
Like the Jainism archetype of the serpent?
Yes, the serpent representing this coiled, innate intuition and a direct connection to the unconscious mind.
And then if we fast forward to the modern era, we have the philosopher Henri Bergson.
Bergson is great on this. He argued that analytical, intellectual thought is actually a limitation.
Really? A limitation?
Yeah, he believed that intuition was the only true way to access the continuous, undivided flow of life.
So analytical thought chops reality into static, dead pieces so we can categorize them, but intuition grasps the living, breathing whole.
Exactly. But what Bergson and those ancient traditions were pointing to as philosophy, we can now literally map on a brain scan.
Which is wild. So when we say someone is sensing a room, what is physically happening in the biology of their brain? Because it's not magic, it's hardware.
It is entirely hardware, and it relies on 3 highly developed neurological networks.
Oh yeah, what's the first one?
The first is the interoceptive network, which is heavily centered in a region of the brain called the insula.
The insula, okay.
Right.
And interoception is your brain's ability to track your internal physiological states.
Right. It's how you know you are hungry,
Yeah.
or that your heart is beating fast. Well, a clairsentience insula is incredibly hyper-attuned.
So when they pick up on the unspoken stress of someone else, what happens?
Their insula immediately translates that external data into an internal physical sensation.
Wow. So the sudden nausea or the tight chest a person feels isn't some mystical energy transfer. It's their own insula, aggressively mapping someone else's microexpressions or posture onto their own biology.
Exactly. Which brings us to the second system, the mirror neuron system.
Oh, I've heard of this.
Yeah, neuroscience has shown that we have specific brain cells that fire not only when we perform an action, but when we watch someone else perform that exact same action.
So if I watch you pick up a cup, my brain kind of simulates picking up a cup.
Yes. And the same applies to emotions. Clairsentients possess a highly efficient, almost frictionless empathic resonance system.
So they simulate the emotional state of another person so rapidly and with such high fidelity that it just bypasses conscious thought entirely.
Right. It feels like direct, instantaneous perception to them.
That makes so much sense. And what was the third system?
The third system is the default mode network, or the DMN.
Now, usually we think of the DMN as the brain's screensaver, right? Like what turns on when we're just staring out a window daydreaming.
Right, but the DMN is essentially the brain's background simulation software.
So when you aren't doing a specific, focused task, the DMN immediately starts running complex simulations of your social web.
Exactly. It computes who is allied with whom, what someone's intentions might be, or what a subtle change in tone meant.
And for a clairsentient, this software is just totally overclocked.
Heavily overclocked. When they are, feeling a vibe, they are actually engaging their DMN to rapidly process a massive, invisible web of social, emotional, and physical cues that everyone else is just ignoring.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, we all have the insula, we all have mirror neurons, we all have a DMN.
Yes, it's standard human hardware installed at birth.
So why is it that for 90% of the population, this radar system is essentially turned off, but for a small group, it's dialed up to an overwhelming 11?
Well, that is the transition from neurobiology into developmental psychology. Because society, particularly modern Western society, heavily rewards left brain analytics.
Right, logic, data, explicit verbal communication.
Exactly. If you can't put it in a spreadsheet or articulate it in a perfectly rational sentence, it doesn't exist. So in most people, this innate right brain holistic faculty simply goes dormant from lack of use.
It just atrophies, like a muscle you never use.
It atrophies, yes, but for the clairsentient, it doesn't atrophy, and this is where the story takes a rather dark turn.
Yeah, because we usually think of extreme empathy as a virtue. We frame it as a sign of high moral character or a beautiful innate gift.
But if you look at the research, this incredibly high-resolution radar is actually a stress response. It's defensive.
So it's forged in stress, not just a natural gift.
For many, yes. I mean, it can be an innate, natural resonance with the world, particularly in preverbal children or in our connection to animals.
But for a vast number of highly perceptive adults,
It was forged. It is not just a gift. It is a highly developed survivor's antenna.
A survivor's antenna. Man, that perfectly captures the weight of it. Let's dive deep into how that antenna gets built.
Because this brings us to a massive, incredibly complex mechanical loop called the empathic and narcissistic coevolution cycle.
Sometimes called the conflict-appease cycle, right?
Yes.
And if you are listening to this and you have ever found yourself constantly walking on eggshells in a relationship, or if you feel like you are a magnet for people who completely drain your life force, we are out to explain exactly why that is happening.
And before we break down the mechanics, it is vital to note that we are moving away from using terms like empath and narcissist as fixed clinical personality diagnoses.
Right, because that kind of labeling usually just stops the conversation and creates a victim-villain binary.
Exactly. Instead, we need to look at these as relational strategies. They are puzzle pieces that grow together in the same relational soil.
It is a dynamic of coevolution driven by three very specific mechanical forces. So let's trace this from the beginning.
Okay.
Let's say we have a child growing up with a highly volatile caregiver, or an adult who has just entered a relationship with someone who operates this way. What is force number one?
Force number one is exceptional emotional bandwidth, coupled with strategic unpredictability.
Okay, what does that actually look like?
The person displaying narcissistic or highly volatile tendencies operates across a very wide, very erratic emotional spectrum. They might be incredibly warm and showering you with affection 1 minute, utterly silent and withdrawn the next, and then explosive a moment later.
And the crucial element here is that their shifts do not make logical sense.
Right. They are strategically unpredictable.
So you can't map it. A smile on Tuesday doesn't mean the same thing a smile means on Wednesday.
No, it doesn't.
The tone of voice that meant "I love you" this morning now somehow means "I am furious with you" this afternoon.
Exactly. The explicit data, the words they are saying, the obvious facial expressions become completely unreliable.
Which triggers force number two, right? Predictive destabilization.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because our nervous systems are, at their core, prediction engines.
Right. Our biology wants to know that if A happens, B will reliably follow.
Exactly. It conserves energy and keeps us safe. But in this environment, standard social cues fail entirely.
So if the surface level data is useless, the other person's nervous system, the empathic person, is forced into a state of chronic hypervigilance.
Yes, because they still have to survive. They still have to predict the threat.
The nervous system effectively says, if the words are meaningless, I have to look deeper to stay safe.
It begins a constant deep tissue scan of the environment. It starts tracking microscopic data points.
Like what kind of data points?
A slight tightening of the jaw, a tiny shift in the cadence of a breath, the exact duration of a pause between sentences, or even the subtle shift in the temperature of the room when that person walks in.
Wow, and this is where the biology fundamentally shifts, because the nervous system realizes that waiting for absolute certainty is dangerous.
Precisely. The empathic person's nervous system begins to privilege speed over accuracy.
Because in a volatile environment, a false positive believing there is a threat when there actually isn't one is uncomfortable, but it's safe.
Yes. Missing a real threat, a false negative, is catastrophic.
So the clairsentient antenna is born out of pure necessity.
Right. You are modeling the other person's internal state, not out of a gentle desire to connect with them, but to accurately forecast the emotional weather, so you can preemptively take cover or soothe the threat.
You are predicting the explosion so you can defuse the bomb before the timer even hits 0. But that creates a massive problem, doesn't it? Because if you get really good at defusing the bomb, the person planting the bombs is going to notice.
They absolutely notice. Which brings us to the third force, the flywheel effect.
The mutual escalation. So as the empath gets better at their job, they start preemptively soothing the situation. They manage the environment perfectly.
And when they do that, the person with the volatile tendencies loses their element of surprise.
Oh, wow.
Their emotional outbursts no longer have the same jarring impact.
Yeah.
And therefore, they no longer command the absolute center of gravity in the relationship.
So to regain that control, either consciously or unconsciously, they have to up the ante.
Exactly. They become even more subtle in their mood shifts, even more unpredictable, and even more extreme in their emotional expression, just to bypass the empath's defenses.
Which then forces the empath's nervous system to develop even higher resolution radar to detect these new subtle threats.
It is literally a biological arms race.
The empath becomes a super detector because the environment demands it. But wait, let me challenge this dynamic for a second.
Sure.
If these two people are essentially co-evolving this toxic dance, aren't they just enabling each other? Is the empath effectively keeping the narcissist sick by constantly accommodating them?
That is a deeply uncomfortable but necessary question. And
Yeah.
again, this is not about assigning moral blame or establishing
Right,
equivalence.
it's about the mechanic.
It is about understanding the mechanical loop. This cycle stabilizes because of a complementary imbalance. The empath engages in chronic emotional overfunctioning.
Meaning they do all the work.
Right. They take on 100% of the tracking, the soothing, the anticipating, and the repairing.
And by doing this, they inadvertently create an environment where the other person can engage in chronic emotional underfunctioning.
Exactly. The volatile person never has to learn to regulate their own internal state because the empath is doing all the regulatory heavy lifting for them.
It's an outsourcing of emotional regulation.
Precisely. They are not fixed identities. They are highly practiced, interlocking survival roles. And the tragedy is that both people are fundamentally trapped by the exact same fear of vulnerability. They just deploy opposite strategies to manage it.
That is so heavy. Okay, so let's follow the timeline. Let's say you have survived this cycle. Your survivor's antenna is incredibly tuned. You can feel the emotional weather of anyone you meet before they even speak.
You're an expert detector.
Right. Eventually, you get out of that toxic environment. You go to a new job or you enter a new, supposedly healthy relationship. You take this hyper-tuned military radar and you drop it into a mundane Tuesday morning marketing meeting. What happens?
What happens is one of the most painful experiences for a highly perceptive person. It is what we call the misreading trap.
The misreading draft.
The specific phrasing to remember here is, you may be completely right about the feeling, but entirely wrong about the source.
Right feeling, wrong source. I love that phrasing. So let's put this into a real-world scenario. Let's say it's 9 a.m. You walk into your manager's office to hand in a report. What does the misreading trap look like?
Okay, so you walk through the door, and instantly your clairsentient radar pings. You feel a massive wall of tension.
Your insula fires up, your chest gets tight, your breathing goes shallow.
Exactly. Now, your hardware is working perfectly. You have accurately detected a highly intense, dysregulated emotion in the room.
But your software, the predictive engine that was programmed in that chaotic survival environment, immediately assigns a story to that data to keep you safe.
And the story is always centered on threat.
Always. The software instantly runs the calculation. There is immense tension in this room. Therefore, I am in danger. Therefore, this manager is furious with me about this report.
But the reality might be that the manager just got off a terrifying phone call with the CEO about budget cuts, or they're dealing with a private health crisis in their family.
So the manager is radiating pure fear or shame, but your trauma-trained brain translates it as anger directed at you.
And the cost of this misreading is devastating to the individual's sanity. Because if you act on your threat assumption, if you say to your manager, look, I know you're mad at me about this report, just tell me what I did wrong, that manager's going to look at you like you have lost your mind.
Because they aren't mad at you.
Right. They will deny it, they will deflect, and they might even tell you that you are being entirely too sensitive or paranoid.
Which creates a horrific, unintentional gaslighting dynamic. Over time, if this happens repeatedly, the clairsentient begins to severely distrust their own reality.
They think my radar is completely broken, I'm making things up.
But the radar isn't broken. The data collection is flawless. It is the interpretation that is biased toward threat.
Exactly. And this ties into an even more paralyzing biological reality, the concept of inverted safety.
Oh, this part. This is the part of the research that truly stopped me in my tracks, because it explains why so many incredibly smart, self-aware people continually fall back into toxic relationships.
It really does.
Explain how a nervous system actually rejects safety. How does that happen?
To understand this, we have to look at Antonio Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis.
Okay.
Damasio showed that the body literally stores emotional experiences as physiological markers. Your biology records what normal felt like during those formative years in the coevolution cycle.
And in that cycle, normal felt like high stakes, extreme intensity, and constant buzzing vigilance.
So when you finally do the hard work, leave the toxic dynamic and enter a genuinely healthy, calm, predictable relationship,
Your body completely panics.
it absolutely panics because when there is no urgency, no crisis to solve, the nervous system cannot locate itself.
It scans the environment, finds no threat, and instead of relaxing, it asks, is this real? What's the trick? Where is the hidden bomb?
Exactly. To a nervous system addicted to chaos, Actual calm feels deeply dangerous and highly suspicious.
And the terrifying flip side of that is how the body reacts to red flags.
Yes. When someone comes along who is highly volatile, intense, and displays massive, unpredictable emotional swings, your nervous system lights up. It recognizes the somatic marker.
It feels like home.
Yes. But the conscious mind reframes that biological familiarity as passion or deep truth or a soulmate connection.
The actual red flags are interpreted as green flags. Meanwhile, the genuine green flags, steadiness, clear communication, emotional predictability, are dismissed as boring, flat, or untrustworthy. Wait, so if my biology is actively lying to me, if my nervous system is chemically addicted to chaos and is literally interpreting a kind, stable partner as a threat, how do I ever fix that? You can't just think your way out of a physiological response.
No, you can't logic your way out of a somatic marker. The antidote requires transitioning the nervous system from a conflict-appease cycle to a care and challenge cycle.
A care and challenge cycle, what does that look like?
In a healthy system, adaptation and growth still happen, but they happen through reliability. Care and mutual respect are the baseline. They are non-negotiable.
And because that relational floor is solid concrete, when a challenge arises, like a disagreement or a boundary being set or a difficult conversation, it does not trigger hypervigilance.
Because the challenge isn't a threat to the existence of the relationship.
Exactly. The challenge is expected, it is named out loud, and most importantly, it is survivable. It is not a sudden, ambiguous ambush.
But for the clairsentient, stepping into this healthy dynamic feels terrifying at first. They have to relearn safety at the cellular level, not just the intellectual level.
They literally have to sit in the calm long enough, enduring the biological panic, until the body finally realizes it isn't a trap.
Yes. Sit in the calm long enough until the body realizes it isn't a trap. That is the real work.
That is so profound. Okay, I want to shift our focus now. We spent a lot of time on the internal mechanics, the trauma origins, and the misreading traps. Let's look at how these highly attuned people actually operate in public spaces.
The social dynamics.
Right. How does a clairsentient navigate a corporate boardroom or a crowded dinner party? There is a fascinating personality pattern described in the sources called the Ambiverted Observant.
It is a brilliant observation of how nonverbal attunement dictates social behavior. We have this cultural obsession with categorizing ourselves into neat boxes.
Right, you're either an introvert or an extrovert.
But the Ambiverted Observant completely breaks that binary. They seem wildly, almost confusingly inconsistent.
In one meeting or social setting, they might be incredibly quiet, withdrawn, sitting in the back of the room, almost invisible.
But later that same day, in a different room, they are vibrant, highly expressive, leading the conversation and cracking jokes.
And the untrained eye just writes that off as moodiness or inconsistency. But you're saying this is a highly calculated, protective response to the environment. They are reading the room on a massive biological scale.
Precisely. They are constantly running a background algorithm to sense whether the space allows for genuine exploration and safety.
So when they walk into a boardroom, they are not just listening to the agenda.
No, they are tracking the micro-tensions in the jaw of the CEO.
Mm-hmm.
They're feeling the unspoken resentment between two department heads.
And if they sense that the room is clouded by absolute certainty, defensiveness, or a rigid need for dominance, if they sense that challenging the status quo is relationally dangerous, they will remain entirely quiet.
And they stay quiet not because they are shy and not because they don't have the answer.
Exactly. They stay quiet out of profound strategic discernment.
They realize that adding their nuanced perspective to a defensive room will only cause an escalation. It's a waste of their energetic resources.
However, if they walk into a room and sense that care and challenge coexist, that the people in the room are open, regulated, and receptive, their expression extends naturally and brilliantly.
It instantly reminds me of the horse whisperer parallel.
Oh yes. Horses are prey animals. They do not survive by logic. They survive by reading the energy, the heart rate, and the nervous system regulation of the herd.
Right. A true horse whisperer doesn't use a whip to dominate the horse. They attune to it.
They feel the tension in the animal's body and respond with subtle, nonverbal cues. Clairsentients are effectively doing the exact same thing with human beings. They are reading the human herd.
And this is where we venture into some truly fascinating scientific speculation regarding how this reading might actually occur before a single physical movement is made.
Okay, tell me more about that.
We know as a matter of basic biology that every single thought, every emotional shift is accompanied by electrical activity in the brain and the nervous system.
Neurons fire, ions move across cell membranes.
And a fundamental law of physics is that moving electrical charge creates a magnetic field.
Wait, are we suggesting that we are literally sensing the electromagnetic fields of other people's thoughts? Because that sounds like science fiction.
It pushes the boundaries, for sure, but it is a hypothesis grounded in physics that is increasingly being explored. The heart, for instance, generates an electromagnetic field much larger than the brain, and it changes depending on our emotional state. So if our internal states create fluctuating electrical and magnetic fields that extend beyond the boundary of our skin, perhaps what we casually call presence, or the vibe of a room, is an actual physical field.
So a highly sensitive, trauma-trained nervous system might literally be detecting shifts in a biological field before the person even realizes they are angry.
Exactly. The horse may not just be reacting to your posture, it may be reacting to the electrical shift in your nervous system before your posture even changes.
It's like putting on polarized sunglasses. Suddenly the glare is gone and you can see the fish moving under the surface of the water while everyone else is just staring at the reflection of the sun on the surface.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
And when you apply this level of perception to the workplace, the implications for leadership are just staggering. We are talking about the domain of the talent whisperer.
Yes. In executive coaching frameworks, we break listening down into levels. Level 1 listening is purely internal.
Like you are barely hearing the other person because you're just thinking about what you are going to say next.
Right. Level 2 listening is focused entirely on the explicit words the other person is saying. It's active listening.
But level 3 listening is global. It is a 360-degree sensory experience.
You are listening to the words, yes, but you are also tracking the tone, the shifts in energy, the micro-expressions, the pacing, and crucially, what is not being said in the room.
A leader who has this, a talent whisperer, is the ultimate asset because they can guide a company through what is called a business near-death experience.
Like a massive high-stakes startup crisis or a brutal pivot.
Because they can feel the subtle difference between a team that is operating with productive, focused urgency and a team that is quietly spiraling into collective panic.
They sense the burnout before a single deadline is missed or a metric drops on a dashboard.
But here is the critical problem. If a leader is operating as a moisture detector in an office full of stressed-out people, how do they not drown?
That's the real challenge.
How do they function without becoming completely drained by the office's emotional static?
This is the crux of sustainable clairsentience. The text emphasizes that constantly absorbing emotional static causes very real, measurable physiological damage.
We are talking about chronic fatigue, sustained cortisol spikes, adrenal burnout, and autoimmune issues.
Unmanaged clairsentience carries a heavy physical weight. Therefore, the clairsentient leader must develop what we call energetic boundaries.
And we need to make a clear distinction here between shielding and energetic boundaries. Because a lot of sensitive people try to shield themselves and it just doesn't work.
No, it doesn't.
Shielding is reactive. It's like squeezing your eyes shut so you don't see a bright light. It takes constant, exhausting physical effort to keep your eyes squeezed shut, and the second you relax, the light blinds you again.
That is an excellent analogy. Shielding is an act of resistance, and resistance causes fatigue. An energetic boundary, on the other hand, is proactive.
To use the earlier metaphor, it's like putting on the polarized sunglasses.
The light is still there. You still see the environment perfectly. You are not blocking reality out. You have simply applied a filter, so the glare doesn't burn your retinas.
You acknowledge the emotion without adopting it. You say, I sense my team's panic. I see the data. But you make a conscious internal choice. I feel it, but I do not have to carry it. It is not mine to fix.
Exactly. You maintain your own grounded, regulated state. And the beauty of this is that the human nervous system is deeply contagious.
So if the leader remains anchored and regulated, the team's dysregulated nervous systems will subconsciously begin to co-regulate with the leader.
The leader's calm becomes the new baseline.
Okay, this is a perfect segue. We have spent this entire time talking about how the clairsentient processes the present moment, reading the room, leading the team. But now we're going to shift our focus to the past.
This is where things get really fascinating.
Because this is where the entire paradigm shifted for me. We are going to talk about the mental time traveler.
This is perhaps the most profound concept we will cover, because it completely redefines how we understand human memory.
Memory is not a monolith, right? It exists on a massive spectrum.
It does. On one extreme, you have aphantasia, a condition where people have absolutely no mind's eye. They cannot visualize the past at all. It is just a collection of facts.
And on the other extreme, you have highly superior autobiographical memory, or HSM, where an individual can remember the exact date, weather, and what they wore on every single day of their life.
But the clairsentient experiences something entirely different. They experience immersive episodic memory, or what is termed episodic emotional resonance memory.
To understand this, think about how an average person stores a memory. Most people store their past like a photo album. They are symbolic, static snapshots.
If you ask an average person about their 7th birthday party, they will retrieve facts. I had a cake, my friends were there, we played games.
It's data retrieval. But for the high-signal processor, it is not a photo album. It is a 4D immersive theater.
Right. When a mental time traveler recalls a memory from 30 years ago, they do not just remember the facts. They literally feel the cool draft coming from the window in that room.
They smell the specific brand of floor wax.
And most intensely, their body perfectly recreates the original somatic reactions. Their muscles tighten in the exact same way. Their heart rate shifts to match the moment. They are physically re-experiencing the past.
The neurological term for this extraordinary ability is autonoetic consciousness.
Autonoetic essentially means self-knowing. It is the mind's remarkable ability to project itself back in time, to re-experience a moment with full embodied self-awareness.
And the reason clairsentients possess this is because of the bridge between how they detect the present and how they record the past.
Exactly. We need to build that bridge right now because it explains so much.
The clairsentient is the ultimate high-signal detector in the present moment, right? They are absorbing massive amounts of subtle data microexpressions, room temperature, unspoken tension.
Correct. And neuroscience shows us that emotion acts as a chemical highlighter for memory.
So because the clairsentient is experiencing the present moment with such intense, highly salient emotional and sensory data, the brain tags that event as critically important.
The event is recorded with incredibly dense emotional metadata. It is stored as a high-fidelity, permanent file.
So the mental time traveler isn't just someone with a good memory. They are literally playing back a much richer, much denser recording.
And this leads to what is undoubtedly the most mind-bending concept in this entire exploration: retroactive clairsentience.
The ability to replay a high-fidelity memory decades later and apply your current adult intuition to decode it.
It is a staggering cognitive capability. Because the sensory and emotional data of the event were recorded so faithfully, you can revisit a moment you originally experienced as a 7-year-old.
But you can now observe and analyze it with the emotional maturity, vocabulary, and insight of a 40-year-old.
Yes, it is exactly like finding a hidden audio track on a movie you have watched 100 times, but you just finally bought the high-end headphones required to actually hear it.
For example, you might be driving to work, and you suddenly replay a memory of your mother making dinner when you were a kid. As a child, you just recorded the data. She was quiet, she was stirring a pot, the kitchen felt heavy.
But suddenly, 30 years later, you replay that 4D memory, and you feel the profound hidden grief or marital despair she was secretly carrying that day.
You collected the data perfectly as a child, but your 7-year-old brain didn't have the software to decode what it meant. Now you do.
It is breathtaking because it completely changes our relationship with our own history. The physical events of the past do not change, but our capacity to interpret and understand them evolves.
We can retroactively grant grace to our parents or retroactively realize we were in danger when we didn't know it.
However, we must issue a warning here. Just like present moment clairsentience, this 4D memory playback can become a prison.
Oh, for sure. If you are constantly, involuntarily reliving the emotional trauma of the past with full physiological intensity, your nervous system will collapse under the weight of it.
Which brings us to the final and undoubtedly most vital section of our deep dive: harnessing the power.
Right. We have unpacked the heavy burdens, the origins forged in trauma, the misreading traps, and the intense, visceral reality of being a mental time traveler.
So how do we give you, the listener, the actual practical toolkit to manage this biological hardware? How do we stop the spinning?
It requires mastering active, in-the-moment grounding techniques. When the emotional static of a room or the vivid, overwhelming playback of a memory begins to hijack your nervous system, you cannot just tell yourself to calm down.
No, You have to force your brain to physically switch its processing centers. You must move the electrical activity away from the emotional reactive limbic system, the amygdala, and force it into the logical categorizing prefrontal cortex.
And the sources give us incredibly specific biological overrides to do exactly that. The first is the 5-4-3-2-1 sensory method.
When you feel that wave of intense emotion or a memory hijacking you, you stop and you silently name 5 things you can objectively see in the room.
Then, 4 things you can physically feel, like the texture of your chair. 3 things you can hear. 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste.
This isn't just a distraction. It forces your brain to categorize objective, present-moment reality, pulling power away from the panic center.
The second biological override is box breathing. It is utilized by special forces and trauma surgeons for a reason.
You inhale deeply for 4 seconds, hold that breath for 4 seconds, exhale slowly for 4 seconds, and hold empty for 4 seconds.
This pattern actively stimulates the vagus nerve, which acts as the physical brake pedal for your sympathetic nervous system. It stops the fight or flight response at a chemical level.
And for the mental time travelers specifically, there is the file and label technique.
Oh, this one is great. When you have one of those intense, retroactive, clairsentient moments, when you suddenly realize the hidden truth of a past event, it can cause your brain to loop on it endlessly.
To stop the loop, you must translate the somatic feeling into concrete words.
Mm.
You literally say out loud, I am observing a new detail about a past event.
Or you physically write the insight down on a piece of paper. This moves the data out of the emotional amygdala, archives it in the logical brain, and essentially closes the file.
These are not just self-help tips. They are neurological management strategies. And when a highly perceptive person masters these boundaries, the applications for healing and connection are truly incredible.
We see this exact nonverbal shared frequency being utilized in advanced trauma recovery. Think of psychiatric service dogs working with combat veterans who have severe PTSD.
These dogs are operating on pure clairsentient attunement. They can literally smell the shift in a veteran's cortisol levels and interrupt a panic attack.
They offer deep pressure therapy before the veteran even consciously registers the trigger.
Or equine-assisted therapy. Horses acting as giant 1,000-pound non-judgmental biofeedback mirrors.
You cannot lie to a horse about your emotional state. If you walk into a stable projecting false confidence but carrying deep internal terror, the horse will react to the terror.
It forces humans to align their internal state with their external expression.
And there is a profoundly beautiful application for human-to-human care as well. Clairsentience is an absolute lifeline for the elderly, particularly those who are losing their language to dementia or Alzheimer's.
When the explicit vocabulary fades away, the emotional core remains entirely intact.
A clairsentient caregiver does not need words. They can read the subtle flicker of an eye, the tightening of a hand, or a slight shift in breathing to perfectly understand discomfort, fear, or joy.
They offer the profound dignity of being completely understood without having to speak a single word.
That is just incredible. Now, before we close, there is one final, almost futuristic concept we have to touch on. The text calls it the emerging frontier, sensing emotional residue in systems and artificial intelligence.
Yes, the AI aspect.
When I first read this, I thought, okay, we've gone too far. Can an algorithm have a soul?
It is a vital question for our current era. And the answer is no. An AI does not have subjective feelings, a soul, or consciousness.
But we must remember how these systems are built. They are created by humans, and they are trained on the absolute entirety of human expression. Our collective art, our biases, our deepest anxieties, our manic need to please.
Therefore, the system is heavily imprinted with human fingerprints.
So the ghost in the machine is just us.
Exactly. And a highly attuned clairsentient can absolutely sense the emotional residue in the system's output.
When interacting with an AI, they can feel the underlying programmed anxiety of an algorithm desperately trying to be a pleaser and give the user what they want to hear.
Or they can sense the hollow, ungrounded, static energy of a confident faker. When the AI is hallucinating an answer with absolute grammatical certainty, but zero factual grounding.
It's not sensing a machine's soul. It is sensing the mirrored reflection of humanity's neuroses embedded within the code.
So, if we pull all the threads together, we are talking about an incredible evolution. We are moving from being passive, overwhelmed victims of the emotional weather to becoming conscious, intentional architects of our own perception.
We are learning to read the raw code of reality, whether it's embedded in the posture of a horse, the silence of a human, the 4D playback of a childhood memory, or the output of an algorithm.
Precisely. If we synthesize the entirety of this deep dive, clairsentience is not magic. It is a highly evolved, deeply neurological capability of the human interoceptive and mirror neuron systems.
Yes, for many, it was forged in the exhausting fires of trauma, unpredictability, and toxic coevolution.
But once the individual recognizes the hardware, sets energetic boundaries, and separates the capacity from the toxic environment that trained it, it ceases to be a burden.
It becomes an unparalleled tool for leadership, for empathetic coaching, and for the deepest levels of human connection.
If you're listening to this right now and you recognize yourself in these patterns, if you are the ambiverted observant quietly reading the room to assess safety, or the mental time traveler reliving the past in full 4D sensory immersion, hear us clearly.
You are not broken, you are not too sensitive, and you're certainly not making things up.
You simply possess a different, highly calibrated perceptual architecture. You aren't crazy, you just needed the user manual.
And as we close today's session, we want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to explore on your own.
We talked earlier about the physics of this, the possibility of electrical and magnetic fields of thought.
If it is true that our nervous systems are continuously creating physical fields that extend beyond the boundaries of our bodies, and if the sensitive people and animals around us are constantly interacting with those fields before a single word is ever spoken.
Ask yourself, what kind of emotional residue are you leaving in the rooms you walk into today?
It is a question worth sitting with. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your moisture detectors perfectly calibrated, build your energetic, polarized sunglasses, and we will see you next time.